Marschall here today to talk about telehealth with kids. This is Armani. He is here to show you his tail in the camera, I guess. Welcome. Like I said, I'm here to answer questions about telehealth and kids. I do have a book coming out next week on December 15th, Telemental Health and Kids Toolbox. I've just been informed that if you pre-order today on Amazon, there is a discount code, 15AMY, that's 15AMY, to get 15% off when you order today. I think it's not going to ship till next week still, but yeah, hooray, order now. So if you are joining us from Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, there should be a little comment box where you can put some questions in. I believe that my people over at PESI also have some questions that people sent in prior to today. And they'll be putting your questions through to me, and they will also be putting up those questions that you had sent prior. So thank you everybody who's here and everybody who sent questions and is going to send questions and who ordered the book or plans on ordering the book. Basically, if you're doing telehealth with kids, my goal is to make that as seamless as possible. I know we all got hit with a new way of delivering telehealth services pretty unexpectedly back in March of 2020, and a lot of us are still doing it. And a lot of us, are going to be continuing even post-COVID, because it's a great way to make services accessible for people in rural areas or who have transportation issues, childcare issues, things like that. Yeah. So let's see. What are the benefits of telemental health treatment for kids? So I would say, and it seems like it would be difficult not being in the same room. It is definitely a learning curve. It is a different way of providing services. It can be challenging, but I found that a lot of kids really can engage over telehealth. And I've actually had some, as I've moved back to offering both telehealth and in person, some have asked to stay telehealth because there are a lot of ways to take your in-person activities and do them virtually. Over the screen, there's a lot of different platforms and resources for games, for activities, for things like that. Big benefits of telehealth, obviously, are the transportation issue. I'm living in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and in South Dakota, it's a lot of rural area, a lot of people who are nowhere near any type of clinic. We've had people at our office in years past who it was a 2 to 3 hour drive each way to come for their appointment, and that's really not sustainable week after week. So it's great that kids don't have to be sitting in the car that long, because they don't love sitting in the car that long. Families who have issues with transportation, maybe don't have a reliable vehicle, things like that, can still have their sessions. They don't have to take as much time away due to transportation, missing activities, missing things with friends. Kids who have a medical issue or who have a family member with a medical issue, immunocompromised, it's lower risk for them to do telehealth. Some parents prefer telehealth for their kids if, say, the parent is a teacher or a therapist or a pastor. There's that added privacy of not being seen in the waiting room with your child. It's helpful with kids to have a lot of options available, to basically have your toolbox with a lot of choices, so that if a child isn't interested in one activity, there's a lot also that you can bring. Data is showing that, yes, there are some kids that do better with in-person, that telehealth isn't a fit for them. But generally speaking, for most kids, if the therapist is properly trained in telehealth, outcomes are pretty comparable. And that for a small amount of kids, yes, telehealth isn't the right fit, but also for a small amount of kids, telehealth can actually be preferable to in-person. What advice do you have for a clinician who is just starting out in their telehealth practice. I think that getting training and getting comfortable both with the platform that you're using, we use Zoom at my office, as well as just with the technical and making sure you know what you're doing hardware, software wise, but also with the interventions that you're going to be using. I like to, if I have an intervention that I want to try but I haven't before, I'll do a trial run with someone, just create a link. It's not a real session. My husband has been my guinea pig for a lot of interventions that we walk through it together. I kind of see what troubleshoot things we run into. I can see from my side and the client side what setting it up looks like. I think that flexibility is pretty important. Kids actually adjusted to telehealth a lot better than their parents adjusted to the idea of them doing telehealth. Technology, kids are very comfortable with it, very used to it. They do video calls with their grandparents. They have their Chromebooks for school. Every kid has some screen time activity that they like. So I'll even ask for the child's input. What do you wish we could do in your sessions? And if it's possible to make whatever their preferred screen time activity is therapeutic and fit with their treatment plan, then that's an awesome thing that we can try. Also try to be honest with kids if there's something that I'm not quite sure about that I'm still figuring out myself, just letting them know here's what I'm working on. That was big for me. Last March when we switched to online. I had been doing some telehealth with kids prior to that. But when we moved to all telehealth, I had some kids obviously a little apprehensive. Oh, we're not going to be going to your office for a while. What does that mean? And I said, well, part of what that means is we're going to be learning together what your sessions look like online. And they seem to appreciate the honesty, and they seem to appreciate kind of having that active role in updating basically their treatment plans and figuring out activities, interventions, things like that. Do you think we'll continue to use telehealth to this degree when the pandemic is finally over? I don't know about the degree to which we'll still be using it, because I do know that, for myself at least, and for colleagues that I've spoken with, some of us do have clients that could do in-person or telehealth, but we're specifically choosing telehealth just because there is still a lot of uncertainty. There's new information every day. We only just had vaccine approval for kids down to age 5. Some people work with kids younger than age 5. I don't know about to this degree, but I do think that telehealth was needed for kids before COVID. So my hope is that it continues to be an option after. I do think that as far as insurance coverage, because that was a big barrier before COVID, was getting telehealth paid for, getting it covered. I do know that there's been pushback when insurance companies try to say we're not going to cover telehealth anymore. They've gotten that, well, why not? We have evidence that it's comparable to in-person. You have to cover it. And everywhere that there's been pushback, insurance has kind of caved on that. So I am hoping that means coverage is going to continue. I do think it's necessary. It's absolutely fine if your goal is to go back to in-person sessions. I do think that it is valuable to continue to have the option, or at least have referrals to people offering that option as far as meeting individual client needs for those where telehealth is a better fit or more meets their needs, or geographically it's what they need to do. Like I said, I've had some clients that I've offered to go back to in-person who have actually asked to remain telehealth. My impression has been that telehealth has really made therapy a lot more accessible to a lot of people, and I would like to see therapy being accessible, which means continuing to offer telehealth, but then, post-pandemic, getting to the point where in person, where basically what I would like to see is that a child is doing telehealth or in-person sessions based on that individual child's need. Have you ever had a telehealth intervention go way wrong, and how did you handle it not being in the room with the kid? I'm not sure about going way wrong. I have, just like with in-person sessions, I've had interventions that just really weren't the best fit. Sometimes the child, I'll present something and the child kind of just doesn't want to do it. If an intervention isn't a fit, I do kind of treat it like I would if the child was in the room with me, that, if I presented an activity, if I presented an intervention and the child was like, no, absolutely not. I don't usually say, well, yes, you absolutely have to. I'll be kind of like, okay, so what can we try instead? The tricky thing that with telehealth is not being able to follow the child. So I do have kids who have a very hard time staying on camera. In that case, I do keep the parent's phone number handy, or being able to kind of reach out and say, hey, can you come and help us get redirected, getting support from that. Typically, kids who are too young to be trusted to stay in front of the camera on their own, there's an adult in the house. But I've not really had an issue with kids like full on taking off. If a child is really, really, really unable to stay engaged in the session just on their own, we'll say, hey, what can we make your sessions look like to be a fit for you? And maybe I'll have the parent stay in the session and we can do some family work, attachment, relationship building, kind of taking that approach, because then you do have someone who's physically there to do that redirection. What are some of your go-to activities to get kids oriented to virtual therapy? One that I use a lot is chess. That is also an activity that I have in my in-person office. I like it as an activity because it teaches you a lot about the client. It kind of tells you how they handle problem solving, how they handle frustration. Do they take turns? Do they want to follow the rules of a game? Do they want to make their own rules? Things like that. This was actually lichess.com. I think it's pronounced lichess, but I talk about them in the book under the chess section. Is a website where you create a virtual chess game. You share a link, and you and the client enter the chess room. You're still using your telehealth platform, Zoom or whatever, so you can still see and hear each other, but then you've got the game off to the side. That's handy because a lot of telehealth games do involve sharing a link, so you can kind of talk the child through how we get into the game together. And I will also, to get them oriented to virtual therapy, come out with, okay, so what kind of activities do you play on your whatever device they're joining me from, and kind of have that be a go-to starting point. Or sometimes I'll do like Connect 4 or Uno, because most kids know how to play both of those games. Most kids have some enjoyment of one of those games. And so it kind of helps them feel a little bit more comfortable. We're doing something that's familiar. We're doing something that I already know how to do. And, oh, hey, we can do these things online. It seems like kids and teens are losing interest over the therapy screen suggestions. So especially in the beginning, it can be hard to really know how to get kids engaged. I think that giving them a say, giving them choices for the activities really helps with buy-in, really helps with engagement, because they're choosing what they want to do, and it's kind of drawing them in that sense. Something else that I do often also is, if you'll notice, I have a green screen behind me. I don't know how to do it in this stream, but in my Zoom sessions, I have a number of virtual backgrounds that I can just pull from. So if a child seems like they're getting distracted, I might ask them, hey, if we could be anywhere for your session today, what would you pick? And pull up Google Images, search that, and then that's my background. Or if we're doing some kind of for example, some kids like to play, and they might be like, I'm arresting you. I have a virtual background that I keep on hand that's makes it look like I'm sitting in a prison cell, and another one where I'm in the back of a police car. So just different kinds of options. There's one where it looks like I'm sitting in a lounge chair at the beach, one where I'm in the ocean, on the moon, on the International Space Station. So kind of making it interesting that way. Also found that there are a lot of things that you can do with physical play over telehealth, but if they're having trouble remaining engaged in the session, it can be helpful to choose an activity where they are on the screen, like drawing something on the whiteboard or playing a game together over the screen. That kind of pulls their attention back to the screen. You can also always pull, like, I keep a little bag by my desk so I can put on a mask or something like that to keep them interesting. My other go-to is I just go and get him, because why wouldn't you want to be looking at him? Hi, yes. Any tips for engaging caregivers and families in treatment? Yes. So caregivers, guardians, parents, etc., their buy-in is just as important when you're working with children and adolescents, and sometimes even more so, because they're the ones who are responsible for making sure that the appointment is kept. They're the ones who are making sure that their child is keeping the appointment. I often will start with caregivers because, like I said, some of the caregivers were more apprehensive about telehealth than the kids themselves. Kids were like, "Oh, I'm going to video chat with my therapist now." Okay. So I try to, with the caregiver, say, what questions do you have? What concerns do you have? And then I'll have some frequently asked questions that I'll say, that I kind of have my go-to answers for that. Like they might say, well, how do you do this over Zoom? And I just walk them through it, and I just show them, and provide some of the I'll also sometimes say, if it definitely is not working, we can absolutely look at other options if telehealth isn't a good fit. And I kind of let them know some, say, I have had success with kids that I didn't think would be a good fit for telehealth, ended up doing really well. I really encourage them to keep that line of communication open with me, and just be very clear about the boundaries of privacy for the session itself, the limitations. I am going to let you know any safety concerns, things like that. But also just encouraging them, if you have concerns, if you have questions, please tell me. It's what I'm here for. Do you find kids are tempted to have other apps or windows open during telehealth sessions, like sneakily checking social media, etc.? In the beginning, yes. But my approach is, what do you want to be doing right now? And I really try, because a big part of working with kids and teens is we have to be creative. And it's not really my job to say, we are going to play chess today, or we are going to do this worksheet today. It's my job to make that space what is the client's need, what is the client's best interest in that moment. So if a child is wanting to open up another window or something, I really encourage them to just tell me, like, what do you want to be checking right now? What do you want to be doing right now? And, there are some boundaries. Obviously, I'm not going to allow a client to record our session to put it on TikTok or something like that. But if they're saying, I kind of, I kind of want to be playing this game over here, then I'll say, oh, let's pull it up. Let's see. And, I mean, if you can think creatively, pretty much any flash game in a therapy context, you can say, okay, what feelings is this? Oh, you lost the level. How do you feel? You must be so frustrated. How do we deal with that? Things like that. So kind of just bringing it all back, kind of making whatever happens therapeutic. Can you share a success story from your experience with telehealth? Sure. I mean, so I haven't had as many. I think it's because of the kind of the state that we're in right now, because I've heard this from several therapists. We're not as much seeing people saying, "Oh, hey, I'm ready. I'm ready to." I call it graduating, when they're ready to stop. And I kind of let kids know, I love seeing you. I love hanging out with you. I want to see you as long as needed. But my job is also to help you get to a place where you don't feel like you need to come back. And with ongoing, stress of the world as it is right now, we haven't hit that quite as much. But I think that with telehealth, some of the successes I've been seeing is a lot of, for example, kids can bring their pets into session. And I remember we kind of talked through, and one child really realized how much their animal was in tune with their feelings and was checking on them and was noticing that they were getting anxious before they really noticed that they were anxious. So we were able to start using that as a resource in their home, something I never would have been able to observe if they hadn't been over telehealth. So that's something that's been, so it's been really cool to kind of see what's different and what you're seeing and hearing that you might not have access to if we hadn't had the opportunity to try it that way. My usual interventions are getting really boring. Where can I find new ideas? Self-plug. So there's 102 activities in the book. But also I generally recommend, I'll spend a good amount of time on different like Flash Games websites. Some of them will even let you filter by what games allow you to be two-player. So just kind of checking like what's there, what are the options. If you are familiar at all with the platform for Roblox, there's new games get added to Roblox all the time. So always checking something else out, finding something new. I also often will just ask kids, are there any new activities that you found lately that you want us to try out? Because sometimes they'll come with something. I get some of my best ideas just from clients saying, can we do this? And me saying, yeah, why not? Let's try it and see what happens. Oh, I'm being told one more question and we'll wrap it up. Oh wait, that might have come up sooner. Was that the last question, or was I going to do one more after that one? Oh, also, just so that everybody knows, my website, you can get to either dramymarschall.com or resiliencymentalhealth.com. In the header along the top, there is a contact form. And you can use that contact form to send me more questions. Under that contact, there is also a specific PESI questions contact. If you can, just use the PESI questions, because that will alert me that it has to do with something from PESI, and I can shoot you an email back. It might take a couple of days depending on how busy I am, but always open to more questions. So yeah.